Indigenous military service and sacrifice are a fundamental part of Canada's military history. And recognizing these contributions are essential. I think Canada as a country is moving towards a greater recognition of Indigenous service, both in a historical context and present day, but it's very slow.
So when I first was asked to go look for 2 veterans if they're buried here in the cemetery, and I did notice that there was some obvious veterans that are buried in the Field of Honor that didn't have a headstone, that isn't right. And getting them properly recognized is very important and gives me personal satisfaction as a veteran myself.
I can't imagine anybody not having a place to go to remember their loved ones, to celebrate that life and honor that individual for what they did. For them to be able to have that and also have their own form of closure, it would grant great peace to those families.
The idea of the Indigenous veteran, it is a Canadian icon, and the circumstances of our people were absolutely unique. Some chose to serve for the perceived material benefits of regular food and payment and clothing and shelter. Others were more politically oriented and of the point of view that their recent military service overseas would provide them with greater leverage in agitating for Indigenous rights, both domestically and internationally for that matter.
Uncle Mike used to tell me after we came home from war, they were promised land. They never got it. They were given land that was already reserve land.
Indian status is the legal standing of someone who is registered under the Indian Act. So a status Indian is essentially someone who is subject to the benefits and restrictions of the Indian Act, or in other words, is subject to the Indian Act. And as long as we have an Indian Act in Canada, we will have status Indians. There's an estimated 4,300 status Indians who served during the Second World War, of which approximately 200 were killed. We know that thousands more non-status Inuit and Métis people served without recognition of their indigeneity.
There's graves up here. There's one grave here. These ones here, there was trees growing right around them. I scraped them off. I scraped these off and I found the names on them. There's another one back here. That was covered. We couldn't see it. It was covered. My process to find these is I grew up here. I knew the veterans. I knew where they laid, and I knew they were unmarked. My heart is with the veterans. I want them a proper resting place for them. I want the grandkids and the great-grandkids to know where their loved ones are laying. So this is why I try and work hard in the graveyard, so to try and find these graves and to clean the graves. We do have families that come and clean their own graves sometimes when they have time. It's just a busy schedule. But I think this is priority, our grave, our loved ones here that are gone ahead. We got to look after them. As far as I know, listening to Uncle Mike and my late father-in-law, they never received anything when they came back from the war. Uncle Mike used to tell me, we didn't get treated right. At least their they're honored with a marker. That's one big thing that I wanted to do. But for all the other stuff like the land and that's history now because they're gone, you know. We can't make up for that.
On these two graves, there's no known name. There's nothing on the cross that I can identify, so I'm trying to find. Sometimes there's a nameplate they place on the opposite side. So they might have taken the plate off of here, placed it on the back so people can see it. But the other thing that I see now is that the tags, there's named with numbering tags on the back of the grave. So that tells me that the community government here knows who's buried here and have the tags there. So I'll have to touch base with the community government to see if they have a plot map or at least a list of names of who's buried here. So when I first began researching, I did the old-fashioned way. I took my notebook with me and I came to the cemetery here in Yellowknife and I went up and down every row, looking at the cross or the marker at the front and then walking across the back. So up and down every row in the cemetery. So, and this is an old burial because you can see the moss is growing on top of the wood. So it's been in there for quite a while. I'm recording his name and his date of birth because he's born in 1894. So there's an off chance he could be a World War I veteran, but I'll do a check on the World War I database and see if his name comes up. Somebody's got to do it, and you know, I could say, point fingers, the government should do this, government should do that, or Legion should do this, but you know, it's got to be done.
In essence, Indigenous veterans came back from the First World War and didn't receive equal access to the benefits. So the government created programs to enable veterans to obtain land, farms, and farming equipment after the war. However, it was the Department of Indian Affairs that was charged with administering these programs. Ultimately, only 1 out of 10 status Indians who applied received loans or land grants. Similarly, pensions were also administered for status Indians through the Department of Indian Affairs, and most people were denied. Another reality that some First Nations soldiers came home to after the war was the fact that over 85,000 acres of reserve land had been acquired by the government for non-Indigenous soldier settlement. The money that the government spent to acquire these reserve lands was not given directly to the bands or communities, but rather held in trust by the Department of Indian Affairs to be dispersed as it saw fit.
Very important to show our respects that someone has enrolled and served this country, and the country should be able to honor what that individual has done. There's not many occupations that have the unlimited liability clause, meaning that you could be ordered into harm's way and you can't debate it. You go and do your job, and something bad may happen. So with that unlimited liability clause, then the country should honor its veterans in whether they served 1 year, 2 years, or their full 30, 40-year career. So, it's the right thing to do.
I remember seeing a video of a World War vet talking about how they think that asymmetric warfare, never knowing where your threat's coming from, is insane. But when he said that, I recognized the fact that I can't imagine sitting in a trench, getting ready to run over the berm to override that instinctual survival mechanism in order to literally run into the possibility of a hail of bullets. That bravery, that willpower, it's incredible. It's legendary. And all the sacrifices that they have made themselves deserve every bit of respect, to honor everything that they have done to be able to achieve what we have today. Need to have that ability to be able to honor their spirit, regardless if they're around or not. Their memory alone, that essence that they left behind with us, it's part of who we are. It even gives the younger generations an element to strive towards, to be like. Pillars in our communities for all that they've done. I've had my own struggles and teachings along the way that have truly shaped who I am. But with those experiences, it provides me with incredible insight to be able to not just relate, but be able to communicate that to members that are suffering or struggling in their own way. So right now I'm currently working towards becoming a endorsed and recognized Padre. It is a term that has been used for many years within the trade. Chaplain is more of a proper designation, as Padre is something that comes from the past. There has not been a indigenous chaplain prior to this time. And there are many things that contributed to me being able to be on this path that I'm on now, but it's not an easy one due to treaty policies and whatnot. There were laws put in place forbidding lodge, smudging, Sundance, poultice, made illegal until 1978. So I am a Sundancer. It is a lifestyle choice where my entire focus is to provide the balance. So if you had an ailment of any kind, I would go to the Sundance and I fast for 4 days. No food or water in ceremony. It is difficult enough that it feels as though it takes you pretty close to death in a sense. We take that suffering so that in hopes that your prayers from the ancestors, the spirits, the creator, are able to heal your affliction. There were more than a few instances where I relied on my teachings to be able to push me through difficult situations. In particular, when we are up for an exceedingly long period of time, it can be extremely difficult, and there comes a point in time where you might not be able to tell what's real and what's a dream, in a sense. At that point in time, you're tired, you're cold, you're wet, you're hungry, but knowing that I was put in a position for a specific reason, and knowing that that connection is always there, whether it was in minus 44 and accidentally breathing into my gas mask during a gas attack, running to the front lines, and next thing you know, I can't see anything because the whole mask just froze on the inside, and I'm stumbling around before I fall face first into my trench. But reaching over and touching a tree and connecting with that element that is very raw and still very pure would bring me back and remind me that it's clear and present. Not being able to actually practice spiritual or cultural traditions in the military, or any stressful event for that matter, would be brutal. Our culture is a massive component of our identity. Even though that we're removed from our communities, having that connection through our spiritual means is paramount. It's part of who we are. And losing that ability to do so would be tremendously impactful.
This is a modern day replica of the Covenant Chain Wampum Belt that signifies trading and economic partnerships in peace and military alliance in war. They're essentially memory aid devices incorporating symbols and icons that refer to particular treaty relationships. Things had been within my individual family, like we had always had, of course, photographs of my father, Russ, pictured here in Air Force uniform. He served in the Royal Canadian Air Force from 1955 through 1965. For the 5 years before that, from 50 through 55, he served in the Royal Canadian Navy. Growing up, hearing and knowing about the stories of my, various relatives who had served in the military during wartime. These included my father, Russ himself. He was a residential school survivor, a naval veteran of the Korean War, and an Air Force veteran of the Cold War. His father, Ted Moses, had likewise served in the Royal Canadian Air Force during the Second World War as an airframe mechanic, and numerous other relatives on both sides of the family. For example, my maternal grandmother served as a nurse with the U.S. Army Nurse Corps during the First World War. My father had always spoken highly of his own military service, notwithstanding his Korean War service. He had always spoken highly of it in terms of providing life experience, so I thought I might do likewise. It's been a very problematic relationship. There's no spin to put on that. Certainly, I would have to say from the Indigenous side of the relationship, from the First Nations side of the relationship, we've upheld our end of the bargain.
For many Indigenous people, this was a reassertion of the original relationship with the British Crown. And it spoke to previous military alliances that might go back to the War of 1812 or further. Sometimes the numbered treaties that could be a part of that. And even the Royal Proclamation of 1763, which recognized First Nations sovereign status. So for many First Nations people, enlistment was about a reassertion of that relationship rather than a concession to colonization or colonialism.
Well, certainly part of the, a political challenge or a political reality is that although they were actively being denied the full rights and benefits of Canadian citizenship at home, they were nevertheless at the very forefront in fulfilling abroad that single most onerous and profound obligation of citizenship in donning uniform and bearing arms against the nation's enemies.
Equality was a very common experience for Indigenous soldiers to have had while they were serving. Again, this idea that they were treated the same as any other white soldier. And so the camaraderie of the experience of warfare seemed to transcend race in a lot of cases. Unfortunately, that wouldn't continue to transcend, I guess, when they returned to Canada.
Well, I think in the case of my own father, for example, he exemplified this situation of both residential school attendance and then later military service. He was at the Mushhole at the Mohawk Institute Indian Residential School under exceptionally severe conditions from 1942 until 1947 that he documents in his residential school memoir right here.
In August 1942, shortly before my 9th birthday, a series of unfortunate family circumstances made it necessary that I, along with my 7-year-old sister and older brother, be placed in the Mohawk Institute at Brantford, Ontario. At the Mushhole, I found, to my surprise, that one of the main tasks for a new arrival was to engage in physical combat with a series of opponents so that you knew exactly where you stood in the social structure that existed. The food at the Institute was disgraceful. I would say here that 90% of the children were suffering from diet deficiency, and this was evident by the number of boils, warts, and general malaise that existed within the school population. I have seen Indian children eating from the swill barrel, picking out soggy bits of food that was intended for the pigs. The work was supervised by white people who were employed by the Institute, and beatings were administered at the slightest pretext. We were not treated as human beings. We were the Indians who had to become shining examples of Anglican Christianity. Many children tried to run away from the Institute, and nearly all were caught and brought back to face the music. We had a form of running the gauntlet in which the offender had to go through the line. I have seen boys lay crying in the most abject human misery and pain with not a soul to care, the dignity of man.
Indigenous people had many different reasons that they might enlist, but some people talked about how the discipline in the military was similar to that of what they experienced in residential school, or in some cases probably not as harsh as what they experienced in residential school. And so that made a transition into the military relatively easy compared to potentially, let's say, some of their non-Indigenous counterparts who would not have gone through those experiences.
Uncle Mike didn't share that much, but whatever he shared, he phoned me and he had to tell me a few things that happened. The stories my father-in-law shared, he didn't say too much either about them. I later found out he was a code talker. Because they were told not to say anything, not to tell anybody that they were code talkers. That was kept amongst themselves. There's history on that, but it's in the history.
In residential schools, children were not allowed to speak their Indigenous languages. And by contrast, you have Indigenous soldiers serving in the Second World War who are being asked specifically to use their Indigenous languages in order to send messages that they could keep hidden from the Axis powers. And so this is just another example of some of these contradictions.
You know, everybody served in the same uniform, they underwent the same training, they underwent the same experiences on the battlefield. It's only been more recently that we have tended to focus on the service records of particularly distinguished Indigenous military members. But even that is sort of a double-edged sword too, because, you know, often the preoccupation was, well, who was the deadliest Native sniper of the First World War, who was the toughest commando of World War II in Korea. And even that kind of focus, however unintentionally, can serve to reinforce negative stereotypes of Native people as, you know, possessing potentially these extraordinary or unusual levels of stealth and cunning and that kind of thing. And the presence of Indigenous troops within Canadian military forces overseas was always a lively feature of our international presence, and something that foreign media, for example, always commented upon. The Canadian Army is here, and it includes Canadian Indians and all sorts of, a certain number of wartime myths that arose around that, especially during the Second World War. This notion that special units of Indians had been recruited to, hunt down the enemy and that kind of thing.
It's not black and white. There are all of these nuances. And in the end, it still comes back to resilience. And nothing the Canadian government has done throughout history with regards to the First and Second World War seem to be able to take that away from Indigenous people.
Currently, we're at Back Bay Heritage Cemetery. This was a cemetery that first established when Yellowknife became a thriving young frontier community. When people were living in Old Town and surrounding area and became deceased, then they were buried on this side of the of Back Bay in this beautiful setting beside Jackfish Creek. From records from the 1930s, 1940s are very difficult to track down, so we don't know the exact burial location of Private Miracle. However, with the last post fund, we're able to place a headstone on the entrance or on the outskirts of the cemetery, just to recognize that there's a veteran buried here.
We are here today to reconsecrate the burial locations of 13 veterans who were formerly buried here without a proper military marking. Some had wooden crosses, some had nothing at all, but all proudly served our nation, and it is an honor to be here today to see their graves properly marked in acknowledgement for all that they did for our nation.
All the veterans have served their country with honor and distinction. It is now our time to recognize that in some small way by marking their final resting spot.
Robert James Dodman. He was my husband. Okay, Kimber, you gotta take over.
Robert was her husband, Stephanie and RJ's father, and my brother. We are very blessed that we all can be here to celebrate and have all these wonderful people performing this wonderful ceremony for all the veterans.
To be able to be here to honor him, it's beautiful.
This is my community. I was raised on this reserve. I was born here. It just comes naturally for me to do these things for my community. You know, anytime they need some help, I'm right there to help. All right, this is him then here, so, yeah. talking to the families of the veterans. They're really happy to see this day happen, to see that their loved ones being honored with a marker that they were also waiting for.
He must have got tired of waiting, so he grew his own tree here, as you see. I'm really honored today for somebody honoring that headstone.
I got a little emotional a little bit for Uncle Mike and my late father-in-law, because I was really close to them. And it meant, it brought tears to my eyes. Seeing these, all the markers being laid today, but it really touched me with Uncle Mike and my father-in-law.
It means a lot. Like I said, I appreciate what was all done when she started asking me things. I said I was really happy about it, because I kept asking, I wasn't getting anywhere. Eh? But when she started to work on it and things started moving, yeah, and we're here today. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate her efforts in working.
She's so humble about it, and that's the great part. She doesn't realize what a big role she plays for all our families here. It's not just the love that she has for, like she'd mentioned, her in-laws or her family that are a part of this, but the love for our community, Kwakatus, you can just see it in her. The tears and laughter and smiles and visits today, just, it makes it all worthwhile that we recognize our veterans in the way that we do. To us, it's every Remembrance Day, it's on our agenda. We know that we're going to have a celebration here at the school, but to see it finalized, I guess, that some of our people can come and visit and know exactly where their loved ones are laying it's just remarkable. It's good to be a part of that. I think they were pretty proud of today, pretty honored. We said that standing around Dad's grave. Hope he's pretty proud of us and what we accomplished today, and I think he is for sure.
Thank you very much. I didn't expect to be recognized for this work. It made me cry when I went to the graveyards and saw George with his headstone with a tree for a marker. After all the services he done, I thought, this is how we recognize him. You know, like I said, these veterans are in my heart all the time. I will feel better now that they are marked.
This definitely shows the country's respect and honoring the resting place. So knowing that their family member and veteran has a properly marked place and it recognizes their service to this country is outstanding, and they definitely will remember that.
A lot of people have this notion that the warrior is inherently violent, unpredictable, uncontrollable. In truth, a true warrior is protective, but selfless in nature. Warriors take on the challenges for those who can't. They protect the people that can't protect themselves. And above all, they do it out of love. We forget that their suffering that they endured created everything that we have today, the opportunities, the blessings that we have in our modern days because of the sacrifices that they have made. It doesn't matter what race we are. It doesn't matter. We're all in this together. We're all on this planet together. Coming together, even in the military context, of that warriorship, that drive, that dedication, the discipline. It doesn't matter what background you come from. At the end of the day, if you and I are in a trench together and we're fighting for our lives, my goal is to protect you and fight harder so we can both go home.
Indigenous veterans and their families were not allowed to lay wreaths at the National War Memorial in Ottawa on Remembrance Day until the mid-1990s. I live in Ottawa, and so when I go down to the ceremonies, it's nice to see that there. It's nice to see the Indigenous organizations being able to lay wreaths at the cenotaph. That's meaningful. People often talk about the resilience of Indigenous people, and I look forward to a day when we don't have to talk about how resilient Indigenous people are.
You know, my father's case, beyond the tragic circumstances of his, upbringing as a residential school child, he had a distinguished military career. He was an accomplished public servant, and I know many people talk about how we inherit the trauma of past generations because of residential schools and because of other kinds of colonialism, but I would suggest, based on what I observed of my father throughout his life, if we can inherit our ancestors' trauma, we can also inherit their power and their agency. So that's what I'd really like to emphasize too. So.
The names on the crosses in those foreign lands are graves of young Indians from many bands. Remember them kindly, dear God above, for they gave their all for the land they love. Their loved ones they left, these husbands and sons, with pride and purpose to face enemy guns. They were young and strong and took up the fight for peace and freedom and all that is right. To all parts of the world these braves were sent, fighting with honor wherever they went. They fought with courage, their comrades said, even when wounded with their clothes soaked in red. They died in battlefields, these young and the bold, never having a chance of growing old. These beautiful young braves whose lives were lost gave us our freedom at a terrible cost. Remember them kindly, give thanks in your heart. For this freedom we love, they played a big part. Pray they rest gently in those foreign graves. These loved ones, these soldiers, these young Indian braves.